Hey guys, I'm Jackie Brubaker. I'm an author, producer, 2-time Emmy Award winner, and host of That Girl the Podcast. Each week, I bring on inspiring people and stories to help you become that girl or that guy in your life. That Girl the Podcast is based on the romantic comedy That Girl a Novel, which is now available as a podcast to listen to. Listen to each chapter about finding yourself and adulting in LA. Find That Girl a Novel everywhere you listen to your podcasts. You can also find it on Amazon to buy the Kindle or paperback of. For more, find us at thatgirlthepodcast.com and follow us on Instagram at thatgirlthepodcast and our Patreon page. Welcome, Amy Zeilenga, to That Girl the Podcast. I'm really excited to have you here today. We're going to talk about a heavy subject, but there's always a light at the end of the tunnel when we're speaking about grief. And you definitely have a story to tell about some of your darkest moments in your life that have really sprung into some of your brightest moments that you're in now. And I think what we're here to do is really show people that you do not, what's being presented at this moment does not mean the rest of your life is going to look like this. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. You just got to hang in there for it and you got to work hard. So I always like to let people introduce themselves in brief. So, because you can always do a better job than I can. So introduce yourself and who you are so people know.
So I'm Amy Zeilenga. I am a mother of 2 daughters, and I also am getting married in July to a wonderful man who has 2 wonderful children. So they are my bonus children, as I say.
Bonus children.
So I am an LISW. I can officially say that because I just passed my licensure exam 2 hours ago.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah. So getting from what we'll talk about to today is pretty amazing, and it still hasn't really clicked. I haven't set in with it that all of this is taking place, but I'm along for the ride. I like it.
Yeah. That's so incredible to be a licensed social worker. And let's start with a little bit of your childhood and kind of give a backstory of how you got there.
A lot of my childhood was chaotic. I had a lot of trauma that I experienced. I had my grandmother who, when we talk about being resilient and having factors that play into childhood trauma. I had my grandma who I didn't live with all the time, but she was always a source of support for me. I lived with my mom most of my life up until high school. She struggled with drug addiction. I also had a stepfather she married him just very shortly after she met him. It was about 13 days from what she had said.
Wow.
And so we moved across the country and lived with him. And there was a lot of physical, emotional abuse. Mm-hmm. So I lived in a state of anxiety or just not knowing, what was going to happen one day to the next. And it's hard to explain the way my mom was. And this is something as we go further into things, when someone has passed, you want to say, oh, they were perfect and, all the things. And I love her dearly. And I think that, everything has a purpose and a reason, why things happen. So, it's important for me to mention that I honor her and I do love her very much, but also she wasn't the best role model for me. She had a lot of struggles of her own, and being where I am sitting here today, I understand that. But as a child going through that, it was really horrible.
Yeah. I mean, to watch a parent not be in control and you feel the need to take over and parent them, as well as yourself. And that's exhausting for a little kid who doesn't know better. They're just surviving.
Yeah. And that's a lot of it. Just, I was surviving my childhood, not really knowing what was going to happen from one day to the next, which is why I ended up having, panic attacks and anxiety as I got into my early 20s. I had that. There was a brief period of time that I did live with my biological father, and I didn't know him. I always thought he was this hero that, he would send birthday cards and Christmas cards and all the things. And my mom was just always thought, talked highly of him, but we never lived with them. But there was one year that she said, you guys, you can go live with your dad. Well, it ended up that he sexually abused me. And so that it was, we didn't live with him that whole year, but it just kind of shattered my view of relationships and of men. And so I had to undo all that as I got older as well.
And that's not easily undone either.
No, and I'm not sure. And exactly. And that's part of, when we talk about grief, there's grief with relationships, there's grief with, parents. You think they need to be a certain way or they're this way. And that's what I actually was just thinking about that yesterday. It was Father's Day. And I haven't talked to him for many, many years. And I had that brief thought, no, I really don't want to talk to him, but do I forgive him? I'm not really sure, so it's a process. It's a process. It really, truly is. So
yeah. I think there's something very healthy about, we're always told like, forgive. And, sometimes you just can't, you can't, it takes a long time if you're even going to. And sometimes I think it's just up to everybody, whether or not forgiveness is something they feel that they need to do for them. So I don't blame you. And, boundaries, keep yourself safe, always a good thing, especially from a predator. So,
well, yeah. And I have 2 young daughters and I just, he wanted to come back one time and I said, no, I really don't want you to. So
absolutely. And you're the mom now, you're the mom, you're the adults, you have all of the power and it's just a different ball game,
So I lived with my mom. We moved here. It was a road trip. We ended up here in Iowa with her family was here. So my family's here. Okay. My grandma was here. So we ended up here. And then my aunt was like, you can't keep moving Amy across the country all the time, So I ended up living with my aunt and uncle in high school.
Oh, okay.
So that was the first time I actually had stability for a length of time. Yeah.
Right. And did you like that or did you want to rebel? Because it could go either way in high school, right? You're just like, it's a crapshoot. Like, who are we going to be this day? Like, how did you
deal?
Yeah.
I did okay. I think relatively speaking, I think I did okay. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't an overachiever. I kind of was I didn't know anybody. I had to figure out how to navigate. I went to a large school. And so just make new friends. And I wasn't from around here. And my mom would pop in and out, never knowing what she was going to do. She'd come over, on something and just wreak sometimes, so there's always that umbrella of anxiety, like what's mom going to do next? You know what I mean?
So, and also where am I going to live?
Right.
Okay. So you're already growing up with anxiety, and did you know that that's what that was when you were feeling it, or were you confused on that?
Oh, I was confused. I didn't know. I just thought that was how life was,
And those feelings. Yeah, I completely relate. Growing up in my childhood was very, very stressful. And I was just so thin because I would just have stomach aches all the time because I was under so much stress from my parents. And it wasn't until I literally moved out and went to college that I started to not have stomach aches every day and feel normal. I was like, whoa, I can eat breakfast? What? Yeah, I get it. The reason I ask is that so many, children and teenagers, which I still consider children, they don't know better. They don't really know what's going on. They just know something's probably not right, but they're not sure what. And anxiety too is kind of a strange little devil where it happens at the strangest time. So I'm wondering, was it happening to you and you're like, why am I suddenly nervous? I think is the word that I used to use, is like, oh, I'm just so nervous, but it was anxiety. I just didn't know that word. How did that happen for you?
Yeah. I mean, I would have that. I think I had a little bit of OCD going on that I didn't really realize that's what it was. I don't have it now. I mean, I think it was just because I was so anxious. And so, if I didn't, OCD, where you check the door and all this kind of stuff. So I think that was, and actually, I don't think I've ever mentioned that to anybody, as much as I've been through some self-discovery. I don't know. I just thought about that. But so I had that. And then, yes, I had the anxiety. I did have anxiety in high school, but I didn't know I didn't know what to call it. I didn't talk about it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I do know what you mean.
So.
So let's talk about your relationship with your mom. When were you an adult having a relationship with her, and for how long did that last?
Well, we've always kind of had I don't want to say tumultuous because I wouldn't fight with her, but I would just kind of take whatever whatever was going on. I just kind of was there, and just, and then I would complain about it later to somebody else, like, oh my God, my mom, like it was, so that's how I coped with it. But I never really confronted her on anything. I was just kind of the peacekeeper or good child or whatever. The scapegoat, is that the word? I think I just took a test on this. I should know. But anyway, I was the lost child. I was just quiet. So my sister, who is 4 years older than me, was the one that my mom and her were like super close. And my mom would reach out to her and talk to her a lot, especially when things would go really wrong. But I had little children at the time. So my mom knew enough she didn't bother me as much as my older sister when she was needing whatever she was needing at the time, like drama or whatever, situations that were self-induced. But my sister took care of a lot of that. And so, of course, I do have some guilt about that, but also half the time I didn't know what was going on because they protected me from it. So
you didn't know what was going on with the drugs?
No, I knew that. But sometimes she'd call my sister and just need something, or she was in a situation, or her boyfriend beat her up, or, stuff like that. She would call my sister because she was more readily available to help her than I was at the time with my little children, because I couldn't leave them alone to go. So when you ask about the relationship with her, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. It wasn't, I didn't view her as a mother figure. I didn't call her with parenting advice or, I just kind of respected her as my mom, but then was very distant from her in the sense that I was emotionally distant from her. A couple of years after my oldest daughter was born, she said some nice things to me and she apologized. She kind of knew, like, hey, I wasn't the best mom, but you're a good mom and I am glad that you are. And so it was meaningful. But like I said, she's never been that mothering, nurturing figure for me ever.
And that must have been interesting too, going into motherhood, for the first time. I feel like a lot of people who have parents that are either addicts or something, something's happened. They fear being parents because they don't want to repeat that. They never want that to happen again. Even if they're nothing like the parent, it's like, that's terrifying. Let's just hold off. What kind of process did you go through when you were like, I'm pregnant? Okay. Like, how can I not be my mother? Or was it like that? How did you feel?
Well, I already knew I abstained from doing any kind of drugs because I definitely didn't want to be, in that situation.
Right.
I loved being pregnant. When I had my daughter, I had planned on going back to work. This is probably where it went. Like, I overcompensated, perhaps, maybe. I was going to go back to work full time. I had my daughter and I don't know if it was hormones after she was born or if it was mother, all the things, or if it was just my childhood, but I'm like, I need to be there. Like, I can't leave her. So I ended up quitting my job. I was married at the time. My husband at the time was like, okay, we'll make it work, blah, blah, blah. So I was a stay-at-home mom for about 7 years because I think I wanted to be everything that I could be, miss anything. I wanted, I read to my daughter when she was in utero, I was doing all of the extra things that you read. I was like, textbook, like, how can we be perfect? And so of course that led to anxiety, I'm sure, because then I was trying to overdo, what wasn't done for me.
Absolutely. Your mom did commit suicide. Did you feel that coming on, or was it a sudden shock? How did that happen? How did you find out?
So throughout my childhood, she had threatened and done things periodically about, taking her life. And so it's kind of weird to say. It's just, she said it so much that it was like, she's not going to really do it. You know what I mean? Like So I it was just part of my life. Mom would lay out in the road and wait for a car to run her over type thing,
Wow.
And so there were times she'd get so upset or whatever with the situation she was in. So it was just chaotic. And so the year that it happened, that March, she had tried, my sister, I think she called my sister, her husband at the time called my sister. And then they went and she went to the emergency room. My sister and I talked, we got her help. And it was really difficult, because we thought we almost lost her or we were going to lose her. And so we thought, well, she'll get therapy. And she got better for a while. And then she ended up taking her life in December of that year. So I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to know we took it serious, but then we also, we couldn't be with her all the time.
Yeah.
So it was a matter of, she wasn't with anybody and we didn't have any indication that particular day or weekend that's what was going to happen.
Right.
So
when did you find out that she had actually passed? How did that happen?
So she actually was at a hotel and my sister and brother-in-law found her and then he called me and said that she was gone. So it was although everything was slow motion and all the feelings that you could feel or none of the feelings you could feel happened all in one moment. It's surreal. So.
Right. And, you do this beautiful talk about grief and you outline the stages of grief and the functions of it and how it goes. Obviously, the first stage of grief is always denial. It really is. It always starts with denial. Like you can be like, no, it's anger. Nope, it's denial. Like you're in pure shock. So let's kind of go through for someone who might be grieving the stages of grief, because maybe this is the first time they've actually heard of the stages of grief and they're like, wait, there's a process to this. In your opinion, what is denial like?
Well, for denial, like I gave a speech at the Out of Darkness Walk here in where I live in Iowa, a couple times, but the one that you saw did specifically, I had given an example that right when I got off the phone with him, I remember just shaking my head saying, no, this can't be real. This can't be real. Like, no. I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. So it was definitely denial. I mean, the hotel that she passed away in was about a block from my house. So I drove up there and just, she was in the room. And this is detailed, but she was in the room and I made the decision not to go in and see her because I just couldn't. I still wasn't, maybe because I didn't want to know. I didn't want to believe it, So yeah, that was definitely denial, I would say. And it probably happened your brain goes into shock. So for a few months, you're still kind of like, what the heck happened?
Yeah, I think it would be very strange to be like, hey, like I'm used to getting phone calls and texts and voicemails and suddenly like those still exist in your phone, but you're like, wait, is that a new one? I just can feel like that would happen. I've seen that happen before and it's just a strange feeling of like, no, they're here. I just haven't seen them for a while. Did you feel like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sometimes I still do. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Almost 20 years. Yeah.
And then the second stage is anger. When did that click in for you and how did that click in for you?
So probably anger clicked in about 3 months after. And I don't know why. I don't know if the fog started to lift,
right.
like,
Who knows?
And then I'm like, well, that's, like, why would you do that to us? Like that's so mean. Like, and I'm being honest about, I have the education, understanding and empathy and all the things for somebody that takes their life. I'm speaking from a human being that is just feeling the emotions. So just know that, like, that's when that anger kicked in. I was like, you screwed me on my childhood and then I've got children now, you're screwing theirs up. And I really am mad that you did this. I just hate this. And so I remember I hit my steering wheel one day because I was just so mad and I would go downstairs and I would scream when nobody could hear me. Well, I don't know, maybe they did, but I was hoping they didn't, but just, I had so much just like oh, that was just like, and this is how you're going to go. I was angry about it for a minute there, probably more than a minute.
Anger is such a great place to live too, because it gives you power in a powerless situation, right? It makes you feel strong. It makes you feel courageous. You're just like, fuck it. I'm just going to be like angry. I'm going to do what I want to do. Like, that's not fair. I don't deserve this. It's very empowering. But I do feel like people can get stuck in anger, and they can also get stuck in depression.
Yeah.
Go back and forth between those two. So anger is pretty self-explanatory. Bargaining, I think, is one of those things that people get confused on. Like, what is bargaining exactly? What is bargaining for you? How did that work for you?
I don't really, the one example I could think of is when so her birthday was the day before after she died. So I had her birthday present. We had went out and got it. The girls, my daughters and I, it was going to be grandma's birthday. So I held on to that for about 5 years. And I almost think that's like, if I don't get rid of that present, then maybe she'll come back,
Yeah.
I don't know. Bargaining does get kind of, it's a little confusing, but I just think that probably for me was just an example of, yeah, maybe. Or
Absolutely.
I also thought about, if I had, I don't know, called her, would this have happened type of thing, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the most common bargaining is like, coulda, woulda, shoulda. I should have done this. I could have said this. I could have, just so many what ifs. And that is across the board for grief of any kind. It's just all of these what ifs. I should have reached out sooner. I should have gone to her house. She was just a block away from me. Why didn't I just go to the hotel? Like, why?
Exactly.
And, I think the hardest thing about grief is when you're trying to make sense of it, and sometimes there is nothing to make sense of. And that's when the bargaining gets really bad. The next is depression, which is pretty self-explanatory. But how long were you in a depression for? Because again, that one can last a long time. People can really live in that world for a long time. And I'm not saying that the sadness ever goes away, because it doesn't. It's just I think you learn to compartmentalize it better, and you learn to kind of live with it. But when you're really deep in the actual depression, what was that like for you?
It was horrible. I did make this conscious decision, and I remember this the day that it wasn't the day she passed away. I actually told my sister I was going to do something with what happened, and I just didn't know what it was. So I remember that. But the depression, I viewed all the stages of grief, because I did research, because that's how I try to make myself get through life. I just find out, what other people are doing, or what's really going on with me. And I viewed all the stages of grief as natural childbirth. I was like, that sucked when I went through it, but look, it's okay. Like, just go through. So I remember telling myself that I wanted to feel the emotions. So instead of, and I think I really think that that's key, because instead of, oh no, I'm okay, I would cry. I mean, I would, I don't know. I never knew when I was going to, it was just, I was okay with it. I was okay with being sad for a little while. It was scary. I mean, the thoughts I would have, what if I do that? What if I end up like that? What if and oh my God, that terrified me. So I'm like, I wouldn't want to leave my children like that. So those thoughts are real, and they're scary. I mean, very scary thoughts, but I didn't stay in that as long as perhaps some people would, because I felt it so deeply when I was in it. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. You want to get through it as fast as possible.
Okay, here we go. This is like a big contraction. I know that sounds like a weird analogy, but I remember, I know it's going to get better. It's got to get better. I hate this right now, but it's got to get better. And I think that better for me was knowing what my purpose was and getting to that goal. So I had something to hold on to. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and you had a larger purpose, which we'll get into, but I think for anyone, it's just the goal is like to get out of these feelings, these horrible, all-encompassing feelings. Like, you just want to move through it. I remember the first time I really experienced grief. And so I was just thinking, and I was really young, and I just kept thinking, like, there's all this fire and you really can't walk around it. It's going to take longer to walk around it. And by walking around it, what I mean is like excuses, denial, just, keeping yourself too busy so that you can't think about it. You can't do the work. It's easier to just walk through the fire and feel all of that pain and just be in it and stop struggling so much. You give up the struggle and just sit in it, which is what it sounds like you did. You were like, I'm just going to feel this, because the faster I feel it, the faster I'm walking through this fire and I'm on the other side and it's better,
Yeah. And I wanted to be present for my daughters. And I felt like if I tried to mask it or pretend I wasn't okay, then I just knew it was going to take longer to go through. And I wanted to teach them that it's okay to have feelings. It's okay to go through things. It's okay to, pick yourself back up, or maybe lay on the floor, and not be okay for a minute, but it's going to be okay overall,
Absolutely. So when did you feel like you finally came into acceptance?
Gosh, that's a good question. I think when I just started to think about hope, just that there was just I think in my speech I had said there was a little pinhole of light that I saw, and I just remember thinking, okay, here it's going to be all right. And I'm really spiritual, so I felt like, I could feel her presence in a way that I never felt it when she was here in her body. So I held on to that, and it just helped me accept, like, okay, she's okay. And so it's okay for me to be okay with what happened. With suicide grief, it's complicated. Obviously, there's that guilt component that maybe isn't always the case in other types of deaths. So the guilt of the survivors. But I think I got past. I mean, even when we were just talking about, I'll be honest with you, when we were just talking about, the woulda, shoulda, I felt a little guilt. It's still there. It's just it's recognizing it, and then just realizing, like, I did what I could. It's beyond what I have control over. So.
Right. And isn't that just life too? Like, we just don't have a whole lot of control. We think we can try to have it. Sometimes we can have a little control, but mostly we have no control, and that's terrifying. And I think you feel that the most when you're experiencing grief, is how little control you actually have. And survivor guilt is probably the number one thing that pops up, is just, oh my gosh, I could have done something. And that's a way of trying to, like you said, like trying to gain control back on something that's not controllable.
Yeah.
What would you like to tell people if they have lost someone to suicide and they are grieving and they're not sure how to do it, what to do, and they're really struggling? What would you give advice for?
Well, definitely know that they're not alone. There's a lot of resources out there. I was part of a support group for about a year and a half after she passed. So I would go, and there was other people there that would talk about their losses. So that helped me realize that I wasn't alone in what I was feeling. The other thing I would say, with just death in particular, that sometimes people that haven't experienced it as much, I've unfortunately experienced a lot of death in my life. And so I'm more comfortable with talking about it than others. I don't know. But just know that other people don't know what to do. So it's okay to ask what you need. If that makes sense. Or, hey, I just need a hug, or hey, can you listen to me talk for a little while, and just, it's okay to say their name, so there's a lot of online resources. And then typically there is, wherever you're from, there's going to be a survivor of suicide loss group. If you could talk to somebody therapeutically, I always advocate for that. I mean, that's what I do for other people. So I definitely would do it for myself. So there's a lot of resources out there, though. And just know that you're not alone.
Yeah. And so what happened, one of the beautiful things that happened, is that you went back to school after this. You felt inspired to go back to school to help others. Was that something you always wanted to do, or was it coming from a chaotic childhood? What was it about social work that you really felt called to do?
Just helping other people like my mom. When that day because I knew there was something. I went to school for different things here and there, but I never really knew exactly what it was. Then I got married, had children. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to stay home. And then I knew there was something else. I knew I would continue somewhere. I just didn't know where. And so, the day that it happened, I vividly remember just saying to my sister, Mom, this is my life was designed to do this. Like, and that's really weird to say, but there's nothing else I could do that would provide me with as much joy inside.
Yeah. I was going to say fulfillment. Yeah.
It's just because I get it, there's a lot. It just gave me a reason to all that craziness I'm able to put into something positive,
Absolutely.
And be there for someone else, because there were people that were there for me along the way. So,
yeah. So that's so exciting. Is there anything you'd like to leave everyone with?
Just know that you always have the answers inside of you if you just take a minute and listen to your higher self. Sometimes we get caught up in the busyness of life, or what other people think, or what you think other people are thinking, and it's just, it always comes back down to who you really are. And so just be authentic, right?
Absolutely.
It's easy. It's a vulnerable thing to do. I mean, this is vulnerable,
It is hard to be vulnerable, but you've been very vulnerable. And I think that a lot of people will really benefit by listening to your story. It might be similar to theirs. And I think that when you hear someone's story that is similar to yours, it is the most cathartic, helpful thing. It really gives you permission to be like, oh my gosh, me too. That's exactly what happened to me. I'm not alone. And I think at the end of the day, people just want to feel that they aren't alone. So thank you so much, Amy. Everything will be in the description below. You can find Amy there if you need to talk, if you're looking for a good social worker or a therapist, I'm going to say as well. Thank you so much for coming on. This was such a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.